Hi, and welcome back to another episode of In the Kitchen with Father Larry. Thank you for joining me today. It is almost Christmas time, and for me, Christmas always means cookies. I grew up with a family that made lots and lots of different fancy cookies for Christmas, and I look forward to that every year. This year, because of the pandemic, I'm not going to be able to be with my family until after Christmas. So all of those traditional family Christmas cookies are just a little bit out of reach for me right now because I'm traveling. But my friend Father Wayne has allowed me to use his really nice kitchen. And so I'm going to make what are probably the easiest cookies in the world because they contain only 3 ingredients. And that means I'm going to be making some traditional shortbread. Shortbread are those buttery, toasty little cookies that you can decorate, you can flavor all kinds of different ways, but they are ultimately the easiest cookie in the world to make. All you need is butter, sugar, and flour. Now, some recipes will have you add cornstarch or an egg yolk or various flavorings. I'm going for the ultimate simple shortbread today. And I'll do a little bit of decorating on them before they go into the oven, but we're going to start just with the simple, basic shortbread recipe. And that starts with 1 stick of butter and 1 cup of flour and about 1/3 of a cup of super fine sugar. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, where do I get super fine sugar? My grocery store has either plain granulated sugar or it has powdered sugar, confectioner's sugar. What is superfine sugar? Basically, superfine sugar is kind of halfway to powdered sugar, but not quite. And if you can't find it in the store, the easiest way to get superfine sugar is to take plain old granulated sugar and put it in a dry blender and whiz it around in the blender for about 3 minutes, and you'll find it'll have broken up all of the sugar crystals and you'll get superfine sugar. Now, another way to do that, if you happen to have the equipment handy, is a mortar and pestle, or in this case, a traditional Latin American mortar and pestle called a molcahuete. And with this, you just put the sugar in and you grind it around for a little bit, and you get really nice, really super fine sugar. I don't know if you can see that. And that's what I'm going to be putting in to our shortbread today. Okay, you can now peer into the bowl of my stand mixer. I'm going to put in a stick of butter, which I've cut into kind of rough chunks just to help it mix a little bit faster. And then the superfine sugar goes in. You can see it dusts a little bit there as it goes in. That tells me it's nice and fine. Okay, mixer on, locked down, and away we go. Okay, that's about all that needs. I will scrape the bowl down a little bit. Part of the key to a good shortbread is to not handle the dough over much. You don't want a lot of the gluten in the flour activated, which would make the cookies chewy or gummy rather than crisp and crumbly, which is what we're aiming for. So use just regular all-purpose flour, not bread flour. Bread flour's got too much protein in it. All right. Flour goes in. Lock off the mixer. Okay, I'm going to scrape it down to make sure everything's getting mixed in. It still looks kind of loose and crumbly. And that is okay at this point. Okay, that looks like loose crumbs. Now at this point, if you wanted to add some additional flavoring, you could add either a drop of almond extract, because that stuff is really strong, a little bit of vanilla extract, or some grated orange or lemon or lime peel. You could do that. I'm not going to add anything additional at this point. I'm just keeping it simple. Now, if you're using salted butter, there's no need to add any additional salt. If you're using unsalted butter, you'll probably want to put in about a quarter teaspoon of salt just to give it a little bit of extra flavor. Okay, now it's time to take the mixture apart. And you can see that the crumbs of that dough come together really nicely. So I'm going to pat those into a ball and then refrigerate it for just a few minutes before it's time to roll it out. While the dough has been chilling in the fridge, I preheated the oven to 250 degrees, which is lower than usual for cookies, but part of the key to good shortbread is to not let them get overcooked and overly browned on the edges. So it's time to roll out the shortbread, and I'm going to do this without adding any additional flour to it as it's rolling, mostly because I don't want to change the ratio of flour to butter that's already going here. All right. Do not roll it too thin. You're not making pie crust here. Okay, now I'm going to cut out some rounds. You obviously could make them any shape you wanted, but rounds are kind of traditional, at least for Scottish shortbread. Okay, and at this point, a board scraper is really handy for getting them off the counter and onto your cookie sheet. Cookie sheet should be lined with parchment or a silpat if you happen to have one of those. They're very handy. You can put them pretty close together on the cookie sheet because these contain no leavening and they will not rise. Unless you made the mistake of using self-rising flour, which I do not recommend. Okay, pull together the remaining dough. Again, don't handle it over much. You don't want the heat from your hands to warm it up too much. And there's just a little bit left, which I'm going to shape by hand and then eat before anybody else sees them. Okay, let's get them arranged on the cookie sheet. Okay, I'm going to do just a little bit of decorating on these because it is Christmas after all. I have here a bag of Belgian pearl sugar, which is ordinarily used for Belgian waffles. You can see it's kind of these large clumps of sugar. So on a couple of these, I'm just going to push that crunchy sugar right into the top of the cookies. That should give them a little additional crunch. And one more with the Belgian pearl sugar. Okay, then I've got some sugar crystals that are red and white and have a little bit of peppermint flavor to them, which seems appropriate for Christmas. So I'll do a couple of them with this sugar. Again, just pressing it lightly into the top of the cookie. And I have some green decorating sugar. I'll do a couple of them in green. And then I'll do just a couple of them with some multicolored sprinkles. Again, with these sprinkles, you really have to press them into the top of the dough. Otherwise, they will just roll away the way these seem to be doing. Okay, now these are ready to go in the oven. Okay, let's take them out and see how they look. The shortbread's out of the oven and it's ready for a taste. You can see that they are kind of fragile. There's not a lot of protein holding these cookies together. That's why you probably need to roll them a little thicker than you think you do. But also when they come out of the oven, give them plenty of time to cool, because when they're warm, they are really fragile. If they break, don't hesitate to stick them back together again with melted chocolate or caramel or buttercream or whatever you have handy. Okay, here's the one that I made from the last bits that I'm taking for myself. Yep, that's what you want in shortbread. Toasty, buttery, not overcooked, comes apart with just a little bit of a crunch. So anytime you're in the need of cookies, if you're having a cookie emergency, all you need is a stick of butter, a cup of flour, and 1/3 of a cup of sugar, and you are good to go. They take only about 10 minutes to put together and about 20 minutes in the oven, and you have cookies. Now, bear in mind, shortbread can tend to be a little on the dry side, but that just means they are perfect with a cup of coffee or hot cocoa or tea or hot mulled cider or whatever you're drinking this winter. So, if you are finding yourself short of Christmas cookies this year, head into the kitchen and make a quick batch of shortbread and see how you like it. Thank you very much for joining me on In the Kitchen with Father Larry, and I'll see you next time.